Welcome back to Secrets Exposed. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You're the reason these stories worth sharing. Tell us where you're watching from, city or country. We're amazed by how far these tales reach. Subscribe our channel and press bell icon to get daily new and amazing stories for you. Alright, let's begin. The phone buzzed on the nightstand with a violence that seemed to shake the room itself. Daniel Harper blinked awake, groggy, the storm outside already rattling the windows. He reached for the phone, annoyed at first, but the second his eyes found the screen, every ounce of sleep evaporated. "Dad, Mom locked me in the basement. Please come. I'm scared." It was from Nathan, his 15-year-old son. Daniel sat up straight, his chest tightening. He thought he'd misread it. Nathan had always been sensitive, but never dramatic to this degree. He reread the message 3 times. The words didn't change. His pulse raced as he jabbed the call button. 1 ring. 2 rings. No answer. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. God, his voice cracked, half a prayer, half a curse. He snatched his keys from the dresser, grabbed his jacket without even sliding his arms all the way through, and bolted into the night. Rain whipped across the windshield as he sped toward the Harper house, the wipers unable to keep up. His hands clenched the wheel until his knuckles ached. The image wouldn't leave his mind. Nathan, trapped in darkness, calling for him. When he turned into the driveway, unease deepened. The porch light, always left on, no matter how late, was off. The house loomed like a shadow against the storm, silent and cold. Daniel's stomach knotted. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. He pushed through the front door, which was unlocked, and stepped inside. The familiar scent of the house was gone, replaced by something sharper, chemical, bleach. The living room stood in eerie order, no signs of struggle, no sound of life. "Nathan," he called, his voice low but urgent. Silence. "Eleanor." No reply, only the heavy drip of rain outside. Then faint. A sound, a dull thump. From below, Daniel's blood ran cold. He moved toward the basement door at the end of the hallway. His heart pounded in his ears as he reached for the knob. A heavy padlock hung there, new and shiny. He had never seen it before. Nathan's text flashed in his mind again. "Mom locked me in the basement." "No," Daniel muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "She wouldn't." His boot struck the door with a crack. Once. Twice. On the third blow, the wood splintered, the lock snapping free. The door swung open, the darkness of the basement yawning before him. At the bottom of the stairs, on the cold cement floor, sat Nathan. His wrists were bound loosely with duct tape, his knees drawn up to his chest. His face was pale, streaked with tears, his hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. He looked up at Daniel with a mix of terror and relief, so raw it nearly broke him. "Dad," Nathan's voice shook. She put me here." Daniel's heart stopped for a beat. He stumbled down the steps, crouched, and tore at the tape. It came away too easily, like it had never been pressed firmly. Still, he wrapped Nathan in his jacket, pulling him close. "You're okay now," he whispered, though his voice trembled. "I'm here." As he rose to carry his son back upstairs, his eyes caught something along the wall. Boxes stacked neatly, each labeled in Eleanor's tidy handwriting. Tax 2018. Donate. School files. But mixed in were odd things. Prescription bottles, a coiled extension cord, and a black tripod without a phone. And there, a tiny red light blinked steadily on a shelf. A camera, maybe, watching. Daniel's breath hitched. He tightened his grip on Nathan and moved toward the stairs, every muscle screaming with questions he couldn't yet ask. Upstairs, the house creaked softly. A floorboard moved. Someone else was awake. Daniel froze at the foot of the basement stairs. Nathan's weight pressed against him. The boy's breath was shallow, his small fists gripping the fabric of his father's jacket, like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Then the sound came again, a faint creak above. Someone was moving. Daniel's throat tightened. Eleanor. She had to be here. But why was she so silent? Why hadn't she answered when he called? "Dad," Nathan whispered into his chest, voice trembling, "don't let her see me." The words sliced through him. He wanted to ask why, wanted to demand an explanation, but the fear in his son's eyes left no space for questions. He tightened his hold and started up the stairs. When he reached the hallway, the dim glow of the kitchen light spilled into the darkness. The air smelled stronger here, bleach and something faintly metallic. He stepped inside slowly, his shoes squelching faintly on the tile. Eleanor Harper stood by the counter. Her hair was damp, clinging to her cheeks as though she had just stepped from the shower. She was dressed in her pale nightgown, and her face looked drawn, shadowed by exhaustion. Her eyes lifted, calm but heavy. She didn't flinch at the sight of Daniel carrying their son. She only said, with a strange softness, "You shouldn't have come." Daniel stopped, stunned. His voice cracked with fury. "What the hell is going on, Eleanor? Why was our son locked in the basement?" Nathan clutched him tighter, burying his face. "Tell him." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced at the boy, then back at Daniel. "I was trying to protect him." "Protect him?" Daniel's voice thundered through the kitchen, a sharp contrast to the storm outside. "By tying him up? By locking him underground like a prisoner?" Eleanor's hand trembled as she reached for something on the counter. A folder, thick and worn. She didn't hand it to him, not yet. Instead, she said, "You don't understand. You never wanted to see the signs. I don't care about your riddles." Daniel snapped. His chest rose and fell with fury, the veins in his neck visible. "Nathan texted me that you locked him in, and now I find him taped and shivering on the floor." "What signs, Eleanor? Explain it before I lose my mind." For the first time, her calm cracked. Her voice lifted, sharp and brittle. "Because he isn't safe, Daniel. Not with what he's been doing. Not with what he's been planning." Daniel blinked. He looked down at Nathan, who shook his head violently, tears streaming down his cheeks. "She's lying, Dad. I didn't do anything." The storm outside seemed to rage harder, rain pounding against the glass. Daniel's pulse pounded in rhythm with it. He turned back to Eleanor. Her hands were trembling now as she pushed the folder toward him. "You think I'm cruel?" she whispered. "You think I'm insane? Then read this." Daniel snatched the folder and opened it, the paper cold and damp from her shaking hands. His eyes scanned the top sheet, a printed email. The subject line made his stomach twist. "You don't deserve them. I'll take care of both of you. Soon." The sender, Nathan's school email. For a moment, the room swam. He looked again, hoping he'd misread. But no, it was there, black and clear. His gaze snapped to his son, who had gone rigid, his face pale with horror. "Dad, no, it's not what you think." Eleanor's voice cracked, tears brimming now. "It's exactly what he thinks. And this isn't the only one." She pulled out more pages, each one filled with threats, some scribbled, some typed, each carrying the same venom. Daniel's hands shook. "Nathan, tell me this isn't you." The boy's lips parted, but no words came at first. His chest heaved with sobs he was fighting to control. Finally, in a voice barely audible, he whispered, "I didn't mean it. I just wanted you two to stop fighting." The words struck harder than any storm. Daniel felt his knees weaken. He stared at his son, the boy who had always been quiet, thoughtful, almost fragile. To imagine those words coming from him was like staring at a stranger. Eleanor collapsed into a chair, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. "You see why I did it? Why I kept him down there? I couldn't let him near us until I knew what he was capable of." The kitchen fell into silence, save for the storm outside and Nathan's broken sobs. Daniel's world had just split in two. One side showed his son as the frightened victim he'd raced across the storm to save. The other showed a boy capable of writing threats that could shatter the family. And in the middle stood Eleanor, the wife who might have gone too far, or who might have been the only one who saw the truth all along. Daniel's heart thudded painfully in his chest. He didn't know who to believe. Daniel stood frozen in the kitchen, the folder trembling in his hands. The rain battered the windows like 1,000 fists, and thunder rumbled low across the sky. Nathan was sobbing quietly against his chest, while Eleanor sat at the table, her hands folded tightly in front of her as if she were holding herself together by force. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Finally, Daniel found his voice. "Nathan, why?" His tone wasn't angry. It was hollow, cracked, almost pleading. The boy wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, his words tumbling out unevenly. I didn't mean it like that. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted you and Mom to stop yelling all the time. I thought if you got scared, maybe you'd stay together. Daniel's throat tightened. Images flashed in his head. The slammed doors, the dinners eaten in silence, the arguments muffled behind closed doors when they thought Nathan was asleep. He had told himself Nathan was too distracted with school, too absorbed in video games to notice. But his son had noticed. He had noticed everything. Eleanor shook her head, her voice trembling with both anger and despair. That isn't an excuse, Nathan. Do you realize what you did? You threatened us. You terrified me. I didn't know what you were capable of. Nathan's eyes widened in panic. He stepped back, pressing himself against Daniel's side. She's twisting it, Dad. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted things to go back to how they used to be. Daniel's gaze flicked between them, his wife, her eyes brimming with tears, and his son, his small frame shaking, desperate for someone to believe him. You locked him in the basement, Daniel said slowly, his words measured, directed at Eleanor. You tied him up. That's not protecting him. That's something else. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice rising, desperate. Because I didn't know what else to do. You weren't here, Daniel. You were living in that rental by the river, pretending it was just for space. Do you think I didn't notice your bags half-packed? I thought you were leaving us. Daniel's face tightened. He wanted to deny it, to tell her she was wrong. But she wasn't. He had been avoiding the house, avoiding the fights, telling himself it was temporary. I was trying to stop us from tearing each other apart in front of him, he muttered. And what did that leave me with? Eleanor snapped. A son who was writing threats and hiding them where I'd find them. Do you know what it's like to sleep with that kind of fear under your roof? Nathan burst out, his voice breaking. I only wanted you both in the same room again. That's why I sent the text tonight. I thought if Dad came home, you'd have to talk. The words sank in slowly, one by one, until Daniel felt the weight of them in his chest. He looked down at his son, then back at the folder in his hand. The tape that had come off too easily, the strange tripod in the basement, the blinking red light he had noticed, a camera maybe. Small details began to piece themselves together in his mind. Something wasn't adding up. Daniel lowered the folder onto the table and took a slow breath. Nathan, he said carefully, did you set this up? The boy's breath hitched. He shook his head too fast, eyes darting to the floor. His voice came out as a whisper. I just wanted you to come back. Eleanor rose from her chair, her voice sharp with frustration. You see? He's still not telling the truth. He's playing both of us. Daniel stepped between them instinctively, raising his hand. Enough. We're not screaming at each other again. Not tonight. The storm outside cracked with lightning, illuminating the room for a split second. Daniel's thoughts raced. His wife's fear, his son's desperation, the folder of threats, and the unmistakable sense that the story wasn't as simple as it looked. He looked back toward the basement door, where the lock still hung twisted and broken. Something about that place called to him, pulling at the edges of his suspicion. Without another word, Daniel turned toward the hall. Stay here, he said. His voice was firm, cutting off any protests. I need to see for myself. Nathan's hand shot out, grabbing his sleeve. Dad, please don't. But Daniel had already pulled free, moving toward the basement stairs, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. Because deep down, he knew the truth wasn't fully on the table yet, and what waited for him downstairs might change everything. The stairs groaned under Daniel's weight as he descended again, flashlight app glowing from his phone. The air in the basement felt colder now, sharp against his skin. Nathan's cries still echoed faintly from upstairs, muffled by Eleanor's low, strained voice trying to calm him. Daniel's light swept across the cement floor. The duct tape still lay curled where he had peeled it off, edges barely sticky. He crouched, touching it, frowning. Whoever had tied it hadn't pressed hard. It looked more staged than real. He stood and aimed the beam at the far wall. The boxes lined there were too neat, stacked with labels in Eleanor's tidy hand. But among them sat objects that didn't belong. A black tripod, its legs splayed, missing a phone. A coil of extension cord. Prescription bottles with labels scratched off. And then the light caught it again, that tiny blinking red dot. Daniel stepped closer, his stomach tightening. It was a sports camera, small and square, perched on a shelf. The light meant it was still recording. He plucked it off the shelf, turning it in his hands. The battery was almost drained. His mind raced. Why would Eleanor set up a camera if she was hiding something? Cameras weren't her way. She cleaned, she labeled, she controlled. But she didn't record. A thought stabbed through him. Nathan. Daniel's chest tightened. He swept the rest of the shelf with his light. Something glinted, a thin string of twine threaded through the basement latch. He pulled it, realizing the lock could have been pulled shut from the inside, then yanked free. His breath caught. This wasn't Eleanor's trap. It was Nathan's. The realization made his knees feel weak. He imagined his son sitting here, tying himself loosely, placing the camera, pulling the lock shut, then sending the text. It was too detailed for a panicked child. It was a plan. Daniel straightened, his mind spinning. He turned off the flashlight, pocketed the camera, and climbed the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he entered the kitchen again, both faces turned to him. Eleanor's eyes were sharp, watching for judgment, while Nathan's were wide, desperate. "Well?" Eleanor asked, her voice edged with exhaustion and fear. "Did you see enough?" Daniel set the sports camera down on the table with a hollow clink. "I saw a lot." Nathan's face drained of color. His lips parted, but no words came. Eleanor leaned forward, narrowing her eyes at the device. "What is that?" Daniel didn't answer. He crouched in front of his son instead, speaking softly. "Nathan, tell me the truth. Did you set this up?" The boy's chest heaved. His eyes darted to the camera, then back to his father. Tears welled, blurring his lashes. Finally, he whispered, "I just wanted you to come back." Eleanor let out a strangled sound, half gasp, half sob. She pressed her hand over her mouth, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe it. Daniel held Nathan's trembling shoulders. "Son, you locked yourself in. You taped yourself. You wanted me to find you." Nathan broke thin, the dam inside him giving way. His words spilled out in choking sobs. "You were gone, Dad. You were gone and Mom was packing things, and I thought it was over. I thought if I scared you, you'd both stop fighting and stay." The storm outside pounded in time with his sobs. Eleanor turned away, her body trembling as silent tears spilled down her face. Daniel felt the truth press down on him like a weight. His son hadn't been trapped. He hadn't been a victim. He had orchestrated the entire thing. A desperate act from a child terrified of losing his family. But behind that truth, another question rose like a shadow. Who had told Nathan how to do it? The twine trick, the camera, the stage tape? It was too much for a 15-year-old to invent alone. Daniel's jaw tightened. The real answers weren't all here yet. And the deeper truth, he realized, was still waiting in the dark. The storm had quieted, but inside the Harper kitchen the air was heavier than ever. Daniel kept one hand steady on Nathan's shoulder, the other resting on the sports camera. His son's sobs had quieted into hiccuped breaths, but his eyes still shimmered with guilt and fear. Eleanor sat across the table, her body angled away, tears drying in streaks down her cheeks. Daniel's mind refused to rest. Something still wasn't right. The twine on the latch, the loose tape, the recording camera. Those were too precise, too deliberate. A boy might think of one of those things, maybe two. But all of them? It reeked of planning. Guidance. He rose abruptly. "I'm going back down," he said, his voice low but resolute. Eleanor whipped her head toward him. "What more could you possibly need to see?" You heard him admit it. "Isn't that enough?" Daniel shook his head. "Not for me. Not yet." Nathan's hand shot out, weakly grabbing his father's sleeve. "Dad, please don't." Daniel met his son's eyes. They were wide, terrified. Not of him, not of Eleanor, but of what Daniel might discover. That alone made his stomach twist. "I need to know everything," he said gently, prying his son's fingers loose. The basement greeted him again with its chill. His flashlight swept the walls until it landed on the tripod. He crouched this time, running his hand along the shelf. Beneath a pile of old-school notebooks, something caught his eye, a folded piece of paper, edges frayed, words scribbled in thick ink. He pulled it free. The top was scrawled with the title in block letters. Plan, don't mess up. Daniel's blood ran cold as his eyes raced down the page. Tape wrists loosely, don't make it hurt. Camera on, red light must show. Use twine through latch, pull tight then yank free. Send text at 2340, dad awake, mom tired. Stay still. Don't panic. Look scared. At the bottom, in hurried handwriting. If it works, they'll both be in the same room. That's how it starts. Daniel's throat tightened. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment stunt. It was a calculated act. Worse, the phrasing, that's how it starts, felt foreign. Not like Nathan's usual scribbles. He folded the paper slowly, slid it into his pocket, and climbed back upstairs. When he re-entered the kitchen, Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Well, Daniel didn't answer her. He turned to Nathan, kneeling so he was level with his son's face. His voice was calm but firm. Where did you get this? He placed the checklist on the table. Nathan's face drained of color. His lips parted, stammering. I. Eleanor leaned forward, her hands trembling. He wrote that? He planned it. Her voice cracked on the last word, straining between rage and heartbreak. Nathan shook his head quickly, tears spilling again. I didn't write it. I just copied it. Daniel's pulse hammered. Copied it? From where? Nathan's hands shook as he twisted the hem of his shirt. A forum. Online. Someone told me how. Eleanor's chair scraped harshly against the tile as she shot to her feet. A forum? What do you mean someone told you? Who? Nathan flinched, choking on his words. A person named Patchwork. They said if I followed the steps, you two would stop fighting. They said sometimes you need a shock to make people listen. Eleanor let out a sharp, bitter laugh, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief edged with fear. You let some stranger on the internet tell you to fake being imprisoned in your own house. Nathan's chin wobbled. They promised it worked for them. They said their parents almost split, but after the scare, they stayed. Daniel sank into a chair, the paper crumpling in his hand. His stomach twisted at the thought of a faceless stranger feeding his son ideas like this. Someone out there had given him a script. Someone had encouraged his desperation. And Nathan, lost in fear of his parents separating, had followed it step by step. The storm outside had finally eased, but inside their home, a new one had begun, quieter, more dangerous. Because this wasn't just a family tearing itself apart. Someone out there had taught their son how to stage it. And Daniel knew the truth. They hadn't reached the end of the story yet. They'd only pulled back the first layer. The kitchen clock ticked loud enough to drown out the quiet storm outside. Daniel sat hunched at the table, the crumpled checklist in his fist, while Eleanor paced like a caged animal. Nathan sat small between them, his cheeks streaked with tears, his shoulders trembling under the weight of what he'd confessed. Daniel's voice finally broke the silence. Low, careful but edged with steel. Who is Patchwork, Nathan? Tell me everything you know about them. Nathan's eyes darted from his father to his mother, then down to the table. His voice came out small. I don't know who they are. Just a username. They sent me messages on a forum for kids with parents who fight a lot. Eleanor stopped pacing. A forum? Her voice cracked with disbelief. You were talking to strangers about our family? Nathan flinched. I didn't know what else to do. Every night you two were screaming or not talking at all. I felt invisible. They were the only ones who answered. Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose, his jaw clenched tight. He wanted to scream at the thought of some faceless stranger guiding his son step by step into a dangerous stunt. But when he looked at Nathan, he didn't see a conspirator. He saw a boy drowning, reaching for anything that looked like a rope. What exactly did Patchwork tell you? Daniel asked. Nathan swallowed hard. His hands twisted in his lap. They said parents don't listen to words, they listen to fear. That if I made it look like I was in danger, you'd stop thinking about leaving and start thinking about me. They even gave me the steps. The twine, the tape, the camera. I copied it word for word. Eleanor's face hardened, her voice rising with a mix of fury and fear. You could have hurt yourself, Nathan. Do you understand that? You scared us half to death. Nathan's voice cracked. I didn't care what happened to me. I just wanted you both together again. The words slammed into Daniel like a blow. His son hadn't been rebelling, hadn't been malicious. He had been willing to put himself through terror just to glue the pieces of his family back together. Daniel's voice wavered despite his effort to keep it steady. "Nathan, why didn't you just come to us? Talk to us." Nathan looked up then, his eyes red and raw. "Because you never heard me. Not really. You heard each other when you fought. You heard yourselves. But me? I was just background noise." The sentence silenced the room. Eleanor's knees gave out, and she sank into the chair across from him. Her face was pale, stricken. Daniel sat back, the weight of guilt pressing down on him. Every slammed door, every night he'd fled to the rental by the river, every time he told himself kids bounce back, it all played in his head. His son had been collecting those moments like stones, each one dragging him deeper until he grasped at Patchwork's poisonous advice. Eleanor's hands shook as she pressed them to her face. What kind of mother doesn't notice her own son slipping this far? Daniel reached across the table, his hand firm on hers. "Don't. This isn't just on you. It's on me too." He turned back to Nathan, his tone steady. "But this ends now. Whoever Patchwork is, they don't get another word with you." Nathan's lips trembled. "I already deleted the app after tonight. I was too scared." Daniel nodded, but suspicion gnawed at him. The precision of the plan. The way Nathan had been led step by step. Whoever Patchwork was, they weren't just another kid online. They knew exactly how to manipulate someone desperate for attention. And they had gotten their hooks into his son. Daniel rose from the table, his resolve firming. "Tomorrow, we call the school counselor. And the police if we have to. This doesn't stay a secret in this house." Eleanor's eyes brimmed again, but she nodded. Nathan said nothing, only lowered his gaze. Shame and fear etched deep into his young face. The storm outside finally faded to silence, but inside the Harper home, the tension was heavier than ever. Because for the first time tonight, Daniel realized the basement wasn't the darkest part of the story. It was the person on the other side of the screen. The house was eerily quiet the next morning. Rain-washed sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains, painting the kitchen in a pale gray glow. But the silence wasn't peace. It was fragile like glass stretched too thin. Daniel sat at the table with a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the checklist in his hands, the blinking red light of the camera, the word Patchwork scrawled in his mind like graffiti. Eleanor entered, her hair pulled back tight, her face pale and drawn. She moved mechanically, setting water to boil, pulling mugs from the cupboard. Not once did she look at Daniel. Nathan appeared a moment later, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. He moved slowly, carefully, as though afraid to make a sound. Daniel tried to speak gently. "Morning, buddy." Nathan nodded faintly, but didn't answer. He slid into a chair, his hands folded tightly in his lap. The boy's silence was louder than shouting. Eleanor placed a mug in front of him, then sat across the table, her eyes locking onto Daniel's. "We can't pretend last night didn't happen." "I'm not pretending," Daniel replied. His voice was low, firm. "But we can't explode at him either. That's what got us here in the first place." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Don't tell me how to be a mother. He lied to us, manipulated us, and put himself in danger. What happens next time? What if he stages something worse?" Her eyes brimmed, her voice cracking. "What if I wake up and he's really gone?" Nathan's head jerked up, panic flashing across his face. "I wouldn't. I didn't mean..." Eleanor cut him off, her voice sharp but trembling. "Do you even understand what you did to me? I thought I was protecting you from hurting us. But it turns out I couldn't even protect you from yourself." Nathan flinched as if struck. Tears filled his eyes. "I just wanted you both here. Not leaving, not shouting. I didn't care how." Daniel reached across the table, his voice steadier now, though it burned in his chest. "Nathan, you can't ever do something like that again. Ever. You scared us both. You scared yourself. This isn't how we fix things." Nathan's tears slipped free, his voice barely a whisper. "Then how do I fix it?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor buried her face in her hands. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. For a long moment, no one answered. Finally, Daniel said, "We start by telling the truth. No more secrets, no more stunts. And we get help. A counselor. Family therapy. Something. Eleanor lifted her face, red-eyed. And what about Patchwork? The name hung heavy in the room. Daniel's jaw hardened. We find out who they are. We don't just cut the cord and hope it's over. Someone out there taught our son how to do this. Someone fed him a plan to scare us. That's not a friend. That's dangerous. Nathan's voice wavered. They said they understood me. They said their parents didn't listen either. They told me I wasn't crazy for wanting things to be normal. Eleanor's lips trembled. And you believe them? Nathan's voice cracked. You weren't listening. You wasn't here. Who else was I supposed to believe? The words cut deeper than any argument they'd had in months. Eleanor broke then, pressing her fist against her mouth, tears spilling fresh. Daniel clenched his mug so hard his knuckles went white. The boy had reached out because his parents had left him alone in a storm of silence. And in that silence, someone else had answered. Daniel pushed back from the table abruptly, his chair scraping. I'll check his phone. His laptop. If Patchwork left a trail, I'll find it. Nathan looked terrified, but Daniel's tone left no room for argument. Eleanor wiped her face with the back of her hand, her voice sharp but shaking. And if we don't find them, then what? Daniel's eyes were dark, steady. Then we make damn sure no one else does. We shut this down before it ever happens again. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was wariness, fear, and under it, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the first step towards stitching back what had been ripped apart. But as Daniel stared at the faint red mark on the checklist, that's how it starts, a chill slid down his spine. Because he couldn't shake the thought, what if Patchwork wasn't finished with him yet? The house felt smaller that afternoon, like its walls had shifted inward overnight. Daniel sat at Nathan's desk, the boy's laptop glowing in the dim light of his bedroom. The blinds were half drawn, streaks of weak sun cutting across the floor. Nathan hovered by the doorway, arms crossed tightly over his chest, chewing his lip raw. Eleanor stood just behind Daniel, her hands clenched, her breathing uneven. She looked like she wanted to both scream and collapse. Daniel clicked through the browser history. Most of it was ordinary, school websites, YouTube clips, a few online games. Then he saw it, familyhelpforum.net. His stomach sank. He clicked. The site opened with a cheap design, pale blue background, threads listed in endless columns, titles like Parents Always Fighting and How to Get Their Attention. His throat tightened as he scrolled, his eyes landing on Nathan's username. Lonely Son 15. God, Eleanor whispered. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth. Daniel opened one of Nathan's threads. Lonely Son 15. My parents are separating. They don't listen. How do I make them stop? The replies came fast, hundreds of strangers offering sympathy or casual advice. But one stood out, highlighted in Nathan's replies again and again. Patchwork. Fear makes people listen. Words don't. You need to show them something they can't ignore. Daniel's chest tightened as he scrolled. Patchwork's replies were precise, methodical. Stage an emergency. Keep it simple but dramatic. Record it so they can't deny what they saw. Use props. Tape, locks, anything that looks real but isn't dangerous. Send a message when they're most vulnerable. It was the checklist word for word. Eleanor's voice cracked behind him. He was coached. Step by step. Nathan's voice trembled from the doorway. I didn't know it was bad. I thought they were just helping me. Daniel turned in his chair, his voice sharper than he meant. Helping you? Nathan, this isn't help. This is manipulation. The boys' shoulders caved. They listened. You didn't. Daniel's anger deflated at once, leaving only guilt. He rubbed his face, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. He turned back to the screen. Something about Patchwork's profile gnawed at him. The posts weren't scattered, like a normal user. They were focused, repeated across dozens of threads, always with the same message. Fear is the only language parents understand. He clicked the user's profile. It showed a grainy avatar of a patchwork quilt, stitched unevenly. No personal info, no location, no age. But the post count was staggering, thousands. Who has this much time? Daniel muttered. Eleanor leaned over his shoulder. Someone's sick. Someone who gets off on kids, scaring their families. Daniel's jaw tightened. He scrolled further until he found something that made his stomach flip. One of Patchwork's earliest threads, my parents never noticed me until I disappeared. The replies were confused, some asking if Patchwork was okay, others joking nervously. But the account never clarified. Instead, it became a beacon for desperate kids like Nathan. Daniel leaned back, the chair creaking. This isn't another teenager. This feels deliberate. Eleanor's voice was sharp. Then we take this to the police. But Daniel hesitated. His mind spun with unease. If Patchwork had been posting for years, spreading the same advice, how many kids had followed it? How many basements, locked rooms, stage crises had already happened because of one faceless username? Nathan's voice cracked again, pulling him back. I just wanted you both to notice me. Daniel looked at his son. The hunched shoulders, the swollen eyes, the shame pulling him smaller with every second. He realized with a jolt that Patchwork hadn't created Nathan's pain. They had only weaponized it. Daniel closed the laptop with a snap. We're not done here. Not with this. Not with us. He rose, placing a hand on Nathan's shoulder, firm but gentle. This ends today. No more secrets, no more forums, no more Patchwork. From now on, we deal with this as a family. Eleanor's eyes filled, though her jaw stayed tight. She nodded slowly. But even as Daniel spoke the words, a chill ran through him. Because in the back of his mind, one thought wouldn't let go. If Patchwork had found Nathan once, what would stop them from finding him again? Night pressed heavy over the Harper house, thicker than the storm clouds that had passed. The laptop sat closed on the kitchen counter, a silent threat neither Daniel nor Eleanor wanted to touch again. Nathan had been sent to his room, though Daniel knew the boy wasn't sleeping. He could hear the restless shifting upstairs, the floorboards creaking under anxious footsteps. Eleanor stood by the sink, her arms wrapped tight across her chest. Her reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger, drawn, exhausted, broken. What if he tries again? She whispered, not turning to face him. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. He promised he wouldn't. She spun, her voice sharp, trembling. Do you really believe that? Daniel, he lied about the basement. He lied about the threats. He was willing to terrify us just to make us sit in the same room. Do you understand how desperate that is? Daniel's chest tightened. Yes, and that's why we can't treat him like a criminal. He's our son, Eleanor. He's drowning, and instead of pulling him up, we kept fighting until someone else reached in. Her eyes flashed with pain. Don't you dare put this on me alone. You left. You ran to your rental and called it space. He saw you packing, Daniel. He thought you were abandoning him. The truth struck hard because it was true. He'd told himself staying at the River apartment was temporary, a way to stop the screaming matches. But he hadn't realized how Nathan saw it, how it had looked like his father slipping away piece by piece. Eleanor's voice softened then, cracking under its own weight. He's not stable. If some faceless stranger could convince him to tie himself up and lock himself in the basement, what's next? What if Patchwork tells him to do something worse? Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't, because the same thought had gnawed at him all day. He finally said, Tomorrow, I'll take the laptop to the school counselor, maybe even the police. Eleanor nodded faintly, though her shoulders didn't relax. Upstairs, a sudden thump broke the quiet. Both parents froze. Daniel rushed to the staircase, Eleanor close behind. They found Nathan sitting on the floor of his room, his back against the bed, his hands clutching his phone. His face was blotched red from crying. Daniel knelt quickly. What happened? Nathan shoved the phone toward him, his voice shaking. They found me. Patchwork. They messaged me again. Daniel took the phone. On the screen was a new notification from an unfamiliar app, one Daniel didn't recognize. The message was short but chilling. Patchwork, you did well, but they still don't see you. Next time, you'll have to be louder. Daniel's stomach dropped. Eleanor's gasp cut the air. Nathan curled into himself, sobbing. I didn't ask them to. I deleted everything, I swear. They just came back. Daniel felt his blood run cold. Patchwork hadn't just been a forum stranger. They had followed Nathan across platforms, hunting him even after he cut ties. He stood slowly, the phone trembling in his grip. This isn't just some random kid online. This is someone who knows what they're doing. Eleanor grabbed Daniel's arm, her eyes wide with fear. We have to go to the police. Now. Daniel looked at his son, shaking, terrified, desperate to be believed. And for the first time, he realized this wasn't just about saving his family from breaking apart. It was about protecting Nathan from someone out there who wanted to tear him apart piece by piece. And Patchwork wasn't finished. The Harper house no longer felt like home. Every shadow carried weight. Every buzz of a phone felt like an alarm. Daniel sat at the dining table with Nathan's device in his hands, scrolling through the chilling new message. Next time, you'll have to be louder. Eleanor hovered near the window, her arms wrapped around herself. She kept glancing toward Nathan's room, as if afraid he might vanish if she didn't check. Nathan sat slumped on the couch, pale, his hands wringing together until his knuckles reddened. Daniel's voice broke the silence. We're going to the police tomorrow morning. No delays. Eleanor turned sharply. Tomorrow? Daniel, what if Patchwork pushes him to do something tonight? What if this doesn't stop? Her voice cracked, edged with panic. She crossed the room, kneeling beside Nathan. Baby, you can't answer them. Not once. Promise me. Nathan's lip trembled. I already blocked them. But what if they just make a new account? The fear in his eyes made Daniel's stomach knot. He'd never seen his son so small, so powerless. This wasn't teenage rebellion. It was a child trapped in someone else's grip. Daniel placed the phone face down on the table. Then we cut them off completely. No phone, no laptop. Nothing until we figure this out. Nathan's head snapped up. What? No, you can't take everything. That's the only way I talk to my friends. If you take it, I'll have no one. The word stung, though Daniel tried not to show it. You have us. Nathan's laugh was bitter, hollow. Do I? You never hear. Mom's always at work. The only people who actually listen are out there. He nodded toward the phone, his eyes wet. Even if they're bad. Eleanor's face broke. She pulled him in her arms, her own tears spilling. I'm listening now. I swear it. Daniel's jaw clenched. He wanted to shout that it wasn't enough, that love should have been enough before Patchwork slithered into their lives. But shouting had never fixed anything. So he swallowed it down. He gathered the phone and laptop into his bag. This ends tonight. I'll drive these to the police station myself. If they can trace Patchwork, they will. Eleanor looked up sharply. Alone. Daniel nodded. If Patchwork messages again, I don't want it happening under this roof. It's better if I go now. Nathan clutched his father's wrist, desperation flooding his voice. Don't leave. Please. That's what started all this. You leaving. The plea tore at Daniel. He crouched, gripping his son's shoulders. I'm coming back, Nathan. Tonight. I just need to take this step so we can all breathe again. Nathan hesitated, then nodded weakly, though his eyes said he didn't believe it. Daniel grabbed his jacket, slung the bag over his shoulder, and headed toward the door. Eleanor followed, her voice low but fierce. Be careful. Whoever Patchwork is, they're not just a stranger. They knew how to get into his head. Daniel met her gaze, his resolve hardening. Then I'll make sure they never get near him again. The night outside was cold, the street lamps flickering over wet pavement. As Daniel walked toward the car, the weight of the bag felt heavier with every step. Inside, Nathan sat curled on the couch, watching the door close with wide, fearful eyes. Eleanor smoothed his hair, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Upstairs, the house groaned as if holding its breath. And deep in Daniel's chest, unease gnawed. Because even as he pulled out of the driveway, headlights cutting into the dark, he couldn't shake one thought. Patchwork wasn't done. Not yet. The police station was nearly empty at midnight, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above the front desk. Daniel felt out of place walking in with a rain-soaked jacket and a backpack clutched tightly against his chest. Inside the bag, Nathan's phone and laptop felt like evidence of a crime too twisted to explain. The desk officer, a tired-looking woman with dark circles under her eyes, straightened when he introduced himself. It's about my son, Daniel said, his voice low but steady. He's been targeted online by someone calling themselves Patchwork. They coach him into staging something dangerous. Within minutes, Daniel was seated in a small interview room. The hum of a computer filled the silence until Detective Harris, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, entered. He shook Daniel's hand firmly, then gestured toward the bag. Let's see what we're dealing with. Daniel laid out the laptop and phone, explaining everything: the text message, the basement, the checklist, the forum posts. Harris's face tightened as he scrolled. FamilyHelpForum.net, he muttered. We flagged it before. Too many anonymous accounts. No moderators, no real safeguards. A breeding ground for manipulation. Daniel's chest tightened. So Patchwork has done this to other kids. Harris nodded grimly. That username pops up in multiple cases. Always the same pattern. Kids who feel invisible, desperate for their parents' attention. Patchwork swoops in, tells them to stage something extreme. Sometimes it's harmless scares. Other times, he paused, his voice darkening. Other times, it's not. Daniel's hands curled into fists. Who are they? Harris clicked through the account's metadata, shaking his head. Whoever it is, they're careful. They bounce through VPNs, wipe logs. But he leaned closer, frowning. Look here. Every once in a while, their mask slips. We traced one old IP back to this county. Same neighborhood, even. Daniel's blood chilled. This neighborhood? Harris's eyes met his. Yes. Whoever Patchwork is, they're local. The words landed like a hammer. Daniel thought of Nathan, crying in his room, convinced a stranger hundreds of miles away had been guiding him. But Patchwork wasn't far. They were close. Maybe closer than anyone realized. Harris continued. We'll need time to build a trace, but this isn't random. Patchwork knows kids like your son because they've been watching for a long time. They tailor their messages, build trust, then push. Daniel's mind raced. If Patchwork was local, that meant Nathan wasn't targeted by chance. He was chosen. Chosen why? Daniel asked quietly. Harris shrugged, though his expression was grave. Maybe your son posted in the wrong thread. Maybe Patchwork noticed him at school. We don't know yet, but we'll find out. Daniel's stomach twisted. At school. Nathan's school. His friends. His classmates. Someone close enough to slip through cracks without anyone noticing. Harris shut the laptop gently, folding his hands. Go home to your family. Keep him away from screens until we finish our work. And Mr. Harper, don't tell your son everything yet. If he knows Patchwork is local, it'll terrify him even more. Daniel nodded, though his insides churned. He left the station with the bag lighter, but his heart heavier. The drive home was a blur of empty streets and street lamps slicing through fog. When he pulled into the driveway, the house looked too still. He stepped inside quietly. Eleanor was dozing on the couch, exhaustion written across her face. Nathan wasn't in sight. Eleanor, Daniel whispered, shaking her gently awake. Where's Nathan? She blinked, groggy, then frowned. In his room. What? But the upstairs hallway was silent. Too silent. Daniel's chest seized as he pushed open Nathan's door. The bed was empty, the blanket tossed aside. The window stood half open, rain dripping from the sill. On the desk lay a single scrap of paper, written in hurried scrawl. They said if I go to them, you'll finally understand. Daniel's knees buckled. His worst fear had just come true. Patchwork hadn't just found his son. They had taken him. Daniel's body moved before his mind could catch up. He tore through the house, calling Nathan's name, yanking open closets, pounding on the bathroom door, scanning every shadow. Eleanor stumbled after him, her face white with panic. He's gone, Daniel whispered hoarsely, clutching the note in his fist. They said if I go to them, you'll finally understand. Eleanor grabbed the paper, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold it. Where would he go? Who's they? Daniel's eyes darted to the window, rain slicking the driveway. His gut churned. Patchwork hadn't been a distant monster on a screen. They were here, local, close enough to lure Nathan out in the dead of night. His phone vibrated suddenly in his pocket. A new message. The number was unknown, but the text made his blood run cold. Patchwork, if you want him back, come to the old gym. No police. No lies. Just the truth. Daniel's breath caught. The old gym, abandoned for years, 2 blocks from Nathan's school. He'd walked past it 100 times, never knowing it hid the shadow that had crawled into his son's life. Eleanor clutched his arm, her voice breaking. Daniel, you can't go alone. I don't have a choice, he snapped, then then softened at her stricken face. I'll bring him home. I swear it. The drive blurred into pounding heartbeats and slick roads. The gym loomed in the dark, its windows shattered, graffiti scrawled across crumbling walls. Daniel killed the engine, every nerve screaming. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and rust. His footsteps echoed across the cracked floorboards as his flashlight cut through the dark. Then he heard it, a faint whimper. Nathan! The beam landed on his son, sitting on the floor near the bleachers, knees hugged to his chest. His wrists weren't tied this time, but fear painted every line of his face. Dad, Nathan whispered. I'm sorry. Before Daniel could move, a figure stepped from the shadows. Patchwork. Not a child. Not a stranger from across the world, but a man in his late 20s, gaunt, eyes sharp with something unhinged. His jacket was patched with random pieces of fabric, sewn like a quilt. You finally came, Patchwork said softly, almost kindly. He was right. Fear made you listen. Daniel's fists clenched. Stay away from my son. Patchwork tilted his head. Why? I gave him what you wouldn't. Attention. A voice. You ignored him until I showed him how to scream. Nathan's sob cracked through the air. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Daniel stepped forward, every muscle burning. You prey on kids. You twist their pain into games. Patchwork's smile was thin. Games? No. Lessons. Parents don't hear words. They only hear fear. I taught him that truth. Daniel's voice dropped low, steady. No. You didn't teach him truth. You taught him despair. And I won't let you finish what you started. He lunged, grabbing Nathan's arm and pulling him behind. Patchwork moved fast, but Daniel shoved him back hard into the bleachers. The wood cracked, the man stumbling. For a moment, the air was only panting breaths and Nathan's sobs. Then headlights cut through the broken windows. Eleanor's car. She called the police anyway. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Patchwork froze, eyes darting to the lights. For the first time, his confidence cracked. You'll regret this, he hissed, then bolted toward the back exit, vanishing into the night before Daniel could chase him. Seconds later, officers stormed inside. Daniel held Nathan tight, his body trembling with relief and fury all at once. Eleanor rushed to them, wrapping both in her arms. The officers swept the gym, but Patchwork was gone, slipped back into shadows. Still, the truth was undeniable now. Patchwork was real, and he had targeted Nathan deliberately. Back home, as dawn broke, the three of them sat at the kitchen table. The silence was no longer heavy with fear, it was heavy with determination. We get help, Daniel said firmly. Together. No more hiding. No more running. Eleanor nodded, her hand gripping Nathan's. The boy's eyes were red, exhausted, but he nodded too. The basement would never be the same. Neither would their family. But for the first time, Daniel felt something stronger than fear binding them, resolve. Nathan whispered, You believe me now? Daniel pulled him close, his voice breaking. I hear you, and I'll never stop hearing you again. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. The nightmare wasn't fully over. Patchwork was still out there. But the Harpers had faced the darkest night together. And for the first time in months, they had something Patchwork could never teach. Hope.